listening to Late Night Radio on the SHR Media Network. Caution, there will be mature themes explored and potentially adult language used. If conservatarian words, phrases, certain concepts, or rhetoric offends you, tune out now.
Uh-oh, guess what day it is? Guess what day it is? Huh? Anybody? Julie, hey, guess what day it is? Oh, come on, I know you can hear me. Mike. What day is it, Mike?
Tomo, you magnificent bastard, I read your book.
I drink your milkshake.
How dare you?
I call that bold talk for a one-eyed fat man.
Fill your hand, you son of a bitch.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
Captain. Captain.
Captain.
Captain.
No, not yet. Don't pass out on me yet. Of course you realize this means war.
Freedom is never more than one generation away from extinction. We didn't pass it on to our children in the bloodstream. The only way they can inherit the freedom we have known is if we fight for it, protect it, defend it, and then hand it to them with the well-taught lessons of how they in their lifetime must do the same. And if you and I don't do this, then you and I may well spend our sunset years telling our children and our children's children what it once was like in America when men were free.
I have come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass. And I'm all out of bubblegum.
Good evening, welcome. It's Tuesday, July 21st, the year of our Lord 2020. And I'm back. Not only just back, I'm nationwide. How are you guys doing? Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, welcome to BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon Radio Show, where I am broadcasting behind enemy lines in occupied California, always spell it with a K, a mere 2 miles east of the locus of evil, on the entire left coast, the Bill Mill, the belly of the beast, the Capitol building in downtown Sacramento at 10th and L Streets, where late at night you can hear the death of common sense and its concomitant wail as it wafts from that putrefying edifice. And at the end of the show, when I exit the plush, resplendent, sumptuous, and palatial SHR Media Studios, I'll be smelling the odoriferous stench of sulfur, brimstone, and evil emanating from that aforementioned columned structure from downtown Sacramento. Be forewarned, the next 2 hours, what you're about to hear for the next 2 hours, consists of my opinion and my opinion only. Because of the fear porn that has gripped this nation, the saloon isn't open, but I am still serving stiff drinks. Schiff? Not Adam. Drinks, facts, history, logic, rationality, proportion, context, tradition, intent, and common sense out the back door. I have to remind you guys, we don't water our drinks just like we don't water our conversation. Politics, religion, crime, culture, economics, race, sex, science, law, we talk about it all right here at the saloon, where the speech is free but the booze is not. This is 2020 and I am done with bipartisanship and compromise. This is the new age of modern political warfare, because make no mistake, we are at war. It began with a soft coup against President Trump. It continues with a United States that has lost its mind and is ripe for two things: either utter capitulation or the second Civil War. If our Constitution and our Bill of Rights don't prevail, we will absolutely have lost this nation, and it won't be coming back. If we lose freedom here in the U.S., where else are we going to find it around the world? Nowhere. Now, it's very interesting, and luckily I happened to catch a couple of shows before I got here, or otherwise I wouldn't. I forgot my manners. James Davidson is watching in Facebook chat, so welcome to James. Good to see you there. And in SHR chat, there's Alaskan, Texas Fred, and Sergeant Booker. So great to see everybody there in the two separate chat rooms, and that's as many as I am sufficiently facile to handle at this time, because I'm here in my 7th decade, and it's all about me. It's not about you. You didn't pay good money to hear me sing. That's the other thing that's cool about this show, is unlike some others now who are moving to paywalls, there is, and there I am guaranteeing you this, there will never be a paywall for this show or SHR Media. I made that decision a long time ago. The co-owners agree with that. No paywall. It's all free. You don't have to look at ads of toe fungus. Okay? God, I hate going to sites that may be good and well written, but you have to look at all these ads about all the crazy shit that comes out of people's ears and toe fungus and inserting carrots up your nose. And God, stop with that crap. Just stop with it, please. Like I said, I watched a couple of shows, and this was BZ's manner of Schadenfreude. And if you don't know what Schadenfreude is, I would recommend that you look it up, because I'm not going to tell you, but this is definitely applicable. Okay, so over the weekend in Chicago, 11 people were killed, and at least 70 people were shot in weekend violence. Dude, come on, it's not even Father's Day. There's no holiday. But apparently it was a highly inspirational Chicago weekend. But some people, I think, apparently appeared to think an insufficient number of bodies had hit the floor, hence Tuesday. So just before I got here in Chicago, here's from Chicago CBS Local. Now, this may have either gone up or gone down. This is the last article that I saw. At least 17 people wounded in a mass shooting in Chicago outside a funeral home in Auburn, Gresham, in about an hour or so. So I can only conclude that the great citizens of Chicago are apparently seeking to establish a new daily record for persons shot in a singular incident. And they may have exceeded it. Now, I didn't check all the records. You can go, this is a great site. Go to heyjackass.com, heyjackass.com, and it gives you a day-by-day, sometimes an hour-by-hour update of how many people and how many bodies litter the floor of Chicago streets. I haven't been to that site, so I say the last information that I have is that at least 17 people are wounded in a mass shooting outside Auburn, Gresham. And then I continued listening. Now, this is also some Schadenfreude. I have not been able to confirm this. Maybe some people in the chat rooms here can tell me this. I was listening to, who was that? Geraldo Rivera on Sean Hannity's show. Now, he said this. They happened to be speaking to a Chicago alderman at the time, who's a Democrat, whose house had been trashed by the people of the good citizens of Chicago. And Geraldo Rivera said that, now you and I both know that Lori Lightfoot, Beetlejuice, the mayor of Chicago, has stated time and again that there will be no federal agents coming to Chicago over her dead body littering the floor. And apparently that may have to occur because Geraldo Rivera, unverified, I am saying this is unverified, and I didn't have time to get on my favorite search engine and check, but Geraldo Rivera said that apparently she has just now agreed to 200 federal officers going to Chicago, including FBI, ATF, and DEA agents. They are a federal task force. Now, when I hear that, the first thing I'm thinking, because I went through this stuff, the first thing I'm thinking is, oh, someone somewhere is looking at a RICO or a series of RICO arrests. And here's the glorious thing about when you're arrested under the federal system as opposed to right now, locally, you're not getting out. It's not a revolving door. Your bail will either be none or it will be really, really high. And you'll stay in a wonderful federal facility. And then the sentences from federal crimes are generally a hell of a lot higher than state prosecutions. And that's certainly true for Illinois as well. Now, the reason I'm thinking RICO is I went through part of this in the 90s, in the late 80s and early 90s, on a thing called Project Trigger Lock. And Project Trigger Lock, in California, always spell it with a K, happened to be about a consortium of local agencies, because at the time gangs were erupting all over California. And at least at the time, California, always spell it with a K, had an interest in tamping down crime. We invited and created a task force all over, a number of task forces called Project Trigger Lock. I don't remember the AG, the federal AG who was in charge at the time. Basically, every USA, which is a U.S. attorney, was directed to form a bunch of teams with state, local cops, and look for traditional gang and drug cases that could be prosecuted under federal laws. And it was great. And a lot of those got slammed behind guns. Well, everyone says that Illinois proscribes guns. But the deal that you don't know or hear about, hey, Jimmy Collins, Sarah Nichols, Marcia, great to see you in Facebook chat. But the thing you don't hear is that working together, a lot of really bad drug dudes got put away in the 90s. The 90s were the era of the highest crime in the history of the United States, including now. Although we're starting to kind of approach it, we're not there yet. So I find all of this, with what's stepping off in Chicago, what Mayor Beetlejuice happens to be saying, and what I heard from Geraldo Rivera, I find that just the ultimate in terms of hypocrisy, schadenfreude. Now we're going to find out if this really happened. And right now I don't have the time to go into the areas and look, because I'm going to get into It's Just Me tonight, folks. And with that, tonight, it's going to be an SHR Media special report. And I always start it off.
This is an SHR Media Network special report.
And it goes something like this. We're going to find out about BLM tonight, because it's not about BLM. And it's nothing about the systemic violence against America. Nothing about that has to do with a man whose name no one remembers. Instead, trust me on this, it's all about communism. And I am going to lay out my argument tonight. It's going to take me 2 hours to do it. And if you have anyone who doubts that it's all about communism, at the end of this, refer them to the show, and they will be able to hear the whole thing. In SHR chat, again, welcome to Sergeant Booker, Jack Alexander, Texas Fred the Alaskan, and Guest 2220. Now stop right there with Guest 2220. The onus is on me to let everyone know that Guest 2220 is infinitely better than Guest 2219. 2219, Guest 2219 is so yesterday. And I thank the lucky stars that we have guest 2220 here in chat, because that individual is so much better than the last guest we had. You know it, and I know it. So essentially, in terms of BLM, it's not about BLM. It's not about another gentleman, another guy. It's all about communism. It has everything to do with, ultimately, communism. So let's go back to May 25th of 2020. You remember that specific day? What do you remember about it? When was the last time in the span of, now I know for a fact it's been 57 days. When was the last time in the span of 57 days you heard anybody from the American media maggots make a reference to the man who died on that day while he was in the custody of the Minneapolis police? I'm not going to name that guy. It's up to you to remember him. But I'll wager that you are struggling with that task right now and having something of a bit of a difficult time to do that, despite the fact that, if they're to be believed, the name of that guy is the sole reasoning for BLM and another incident, but now mostly him and other anarchist elements. It's their sole reasoning to have destroyed much of America's cities. Democrat-run cities, I should specify. One man, one fate. He's the pivot and the fulcrum for which all social justice must now stem. So BLM stated, or is he? Well, you're going to hear the truth tonight. Yeah, Fred in chat says, BZ needs to do a comic set. No, I don't have a face for comedy. So let's talk about the truth. Black Lives Matter is an organization that was founded after Trayvon Martin, but it really expanded on the out-and-out lie of hands up, don't shoot. And that was in reference to the deceased felon, Michael Brown, in which he attacked Ferguson police officer Darren Wilson. That was August 9th of 2014. And he was alleged to have been holding up his hands when gunned down by Officer Wilson. In truth, Michael Brown was attempting to disarm Officer Wilson. And that's when we heard some of this then, didn't we?
Established that there was a shooting in the vehicle when Mr. Brown tried to take away Officer Wilson's gun. Mm-hmm. Every police officer across the country knows if someone tries to take your gun away, you shoot them off it. That's the training. Mm-hmm. The reason we have that training is police officers get murdered with their own weapons regularly. Mm-hmm. The decade that just ended in terms of FBI figures, 33 police officers were murdered in the last decade with their own handguns. Then once the pursuit goes outside the vehicle, it is clear from the physical evidence. There's no doubt about it. It's incontrovertible that Mr. Brown was coming back at Officer Wilson.
What
yes.
That's
the key point.
Not to debate.
Witnesses weren't cross-examined.
By the way, this is CNN and Don Lemon.
The physical evidence is the physical evidence.
Was not scrutinized in a public trial.
You do not trust General Holder? You do not trust General Holder?
I don't think,
because this guy is right, because it's Eric Holder who came out and issued that report. Imagine
the information about eyewitness testimony is often unreliable, not just in this case, but in many cases. And there are many, 75% of the people.
Okay, so listen to what Don Lemon is saying. The witness testimony cannot be relied upon because apparently witness testimony, which upheld the officer's version, can't be relied upon. Good to know. That's all a lie. And we mentioned Eric Holder. Guess what? The conclusion that he wasn't holding up his hands, that was held by 100 FBI agents who flooded Ferguson, Missouri in order to conduct a federal investigation of the shooting. We know that subsequently people in BLM were chanting about killing cops, pigs in a blanket, fry 'em like bacon. I don't know why this is still here, but I need to remind you and refresh your ability to listen to this.
Fry like bacon, pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon, pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon, pigs in a blanket, fry like bacon, pigs in a blanket.
That's BLM. That's your loving BLM. I think I already said hello to Marcia in Facebook chat. Welcome to Jeremy. Welcome to Travis in Facebook chat. Great to see you guys here. But, people had another chant. What do they want? What do New York City protesters want? Well, I think this is a pretty good indicator of what they want. Listen to them very closely now. Now they change. What do we want? Dead cops. What do we want them now? That's Black Lives Matter, or BLM. And I will tell you now, don't care what anybody else says to me, BLM is a racist organization that favors one race over another. That is the... welcome to Claudia. I just saw Claudia zip into Facebook chat. When you favor one race over another, that is the very definition of racism. We know this because BLM will not accept that Blue Lives Matter or Hispanic Lives Matter or even, dare we say it, all lives matter. Any number of individuals have been pounded into social paste by BLM and their associates for daring to intimate anything even remotely close to all lives matter, because the only mantra acceptable is Black Lives Matter only. Period. End of statement. No deviation. Or your life, or your family, your employment is going to get ruined, and you will have to wear the heavy label of racist around your neck like a stone of destruction. Like hanging a dead chicken around the dog's neck, belling the cat. NBA announcer fired over controversial All Lives Matter tweet. This happened here in Sacramento. Grant Napier was fired by his radio station, that was KFBK, and resigned as the play-by-play announcer for the NBA franchise, the Sacramento Kings, after he tweeted that all lives matter and was met with backlash. So he lost his job. There you have it. Napier was the canary in the coal mine. His fundamental problem was even expressing a view. You don't get to have a view that's not yours to have. Now, this became a proverbial learning experience for people all over the U.S. Say nothing, tolerate everything. You can be destroyed by the cancel culture. That's precisely the point of it all. Whites don't need, not wanted. You're not allowed to weigh in. Not acquiesce, get sapped, shut up, take it in the back of the head, whatever. You're just some Caucasoid. And apparently the issue as to whether or not whites are even human, well, that's up for grabs as well. BLM is already packed with racists. How about a perfect example? Peter Yusra Kogali, white people are genetic defects. A Toronto-based leader of the BLM Black Lives Matter movement was exposed dehumanizing white people. A black Muslim and race supremacist, Yusra Kogali was caught in a series of social media posts that attack people based on nothing more than the color of their skin. Whiteness is not humanness. Intact white skin is subhuman. And I could go on and on and on, because she went on and on and on. I'm looking at social media bleat from that. And then another one from her. It says, "Please, Allah, give me the strength to not cuss or kill these men and white folks out here today. Please, please, please." So her social media goes into a pseudo-scientific rant on melanin and concludes that the lack of melanin in white people means they have genetic defects. Would it surprise you to know that the posts have been deleted? I'm surprised they haven't returned in full force. But if you go to my blog, you can see them. I have them there. And yet, here I am telling you the truth about this post. That's what I'm here to do tonight, tell you the truth. And the truth is, it's cool to be a black racist hating white people. That's the cool thing right now. You can watch it on TV, you can hear it on social media, you can hear it on television, cable, etc. Welcome to one additional viewer, along with guest 2220 over in the SHR Media chat. Then Nick Cannon went on a rant. He said, "Closer to animals." Nick Cannon goes on a racist, anti-Semitic rant, says white people and Jewish people are the true savages. So he's a former America's Got Talent host, Nick Cannon. Not that I really give a fuck about him, but he's here to illustrate my point. Thanks, Nick. He delivered a racist and anti-Semitic rant on a June 30th episode of his podcast, Cannons Clash. So he hosted this guy named a rapper, Professor Griff, who himself has a massive record of anti-Semitic comments. That's well documented. And they both promoted anti-Semitic conspiracies about Jewish families secretly controlling the world. And probably the planet Zephron, too, even though I have good relations with everybody on planet Zephron. Just saying, for those of you from Zephron who are listening right now. And claim that black people can't be anti-Semitic because they're the real Semitic people. The real Semitic people, Cannon said, are black people. Okie dokie, well, go tell that to the Jews. They have to rob, steal, rape, kill, and fight in order to survive. So these people who didn't have what we have, and when I say we, I speak of the melanated people, they had to be savages. They had to be barbaric because they're in those Nordic mountains. They're in those tough torrential environments. So they're acting as animals, so they're the ones closer to animals. They're the ones that are actually the true savages. Thanks, Cannon. And, of course, BLM says they don't want any cops. Cops? We don't need cops. We want the complete abolition of cops, definitely in Philadelphia in the next 5 years. That shouldn't shock anybody. Yane Nagodo. I can't even pronounce this. How would you pronounce NDGO? Yane Nedgo. A representative from the city's movement told Fox News that BLM in Philadelphia don't want to see any police in our community. She said one of the things we're demanding over 5 years is the complete abolition of police. And then she said, quite often, if there is violence happening, by the time the police arrive, that's already occurred, and particularly in poor neighborhoods and in black and brown communities. So the police are not really a resource for preventing that kind of crime from happening, just a response. Okay, let's think about that for just a second. Let's think about what Dogo said. Those are incredibly stupid statements. And let's be honest, because that's what I'm here for. Let's be honest and clear. Two things I really value. First, Dogo demands a rapid response from cops and bemoans their late arrival when violence occurs. Then wants no police. Stupid person. Ndogo demands less crime, but bemoans the fact that police come in and actually try to, do their jobs. Police. Stupid person. So she's acknowledging that violence occurs in the minority communities, but demands that cops not be in the minority communities. Stupid person. Police are not a resource because, Ndogo, you accuse the police of over-policing. Then you don't want them in the community, but you say you want them in the community, but you don't. Stupid person. And yet the biggest threat to blacks, wait for it, is fellow blacks. Wait, if I had a producer, this is what you would hear. The greatest threat to blacks is fellow blacks. What I call now UFAMs, young, urban, fighting age males, UFAM blacks. Cops aren't the biggest threat. White cops aren't the biggest threat. Young, urban, fighting age males, UFAM blacks are the biggest violent threat to other blacks. And, of course, Planned Parenthood, but that's a story for another day. There are not going to be any major commercials or any breaks between the hours at the top and the bottom of the hour. All you're going to hear is a reminder that
conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
And here's the funny point that I discovered some time ago. And that's also delineated by the stories that I illustrated for you at the top of the hour. Blacks demand respect, but they don't respect themselves. Blacks demand respect, but don't mind littering their own dead black bodies all over major leftist Democrat-managed urban rat cages. Blacks demand respect, but until blacks respect themselves, they don't deserve my respect and they don't get it. So let me be clear, because I know that's going to get a lot of crap. Let me be clear. leftist, BLM, Democrat, non-conservative blacks. You know, the ones killing themselves and slewing bodies all around, and shooting little girls, little boys, infants, and leaving one-year-old bodies in their wake. Those blacks, that's pretty specific. They don't care. Then there are the real Americans. There are a shit ton of American blacks who are great patriots. They are great warriors. They are great believers. They are great soldiers for Christ who have served and are serving this incredible country of ours behind the scenes, in front of the scenes, who are fighting evil in all its forms, to include Democrats, leftists, anarchists, Antifa, socialists, communists, the American media maggots, and more. They're doing that fight on a daily and an hourly basis, who know this country is at its tipping point and that this November's election is the most important, the most seminal, the most critical in all of United States history. But the bottom line is, if you're not conservative, and I think anybody that's listened to the show knows, I couldn't care less what paint job conservatives come in. But if you're not conservative, and I just don't have time for you. Those aren't empty words. Those are just fact. And that gets to be my opinion. That gets to be my opinion. And I will fight for your opinion, and I hope you will fight for mine. And there are more who are being converted every day, leaving the Democrats, leaving evil, seeing the light, and coming over to the good side. It's as simple as that. Either good wins or evil wins. That's binary. Either those who love this country win, or those who despise this country win. The choice is absolutely that binary. There is no middle ground in that. What middle ground is there to be reached in good versus evil? Because that's the point to which leftists have thrust us now. So with regard to BLM, we have made a rather rapid transition over the span of just, 57 days now? Yeah, we have transited in this fashion with regard to BLM. First, we've transited from tolerance. Now we've transited to acceptance. And now the deal is you have to be an advocate. If you are not an active and outright advocate for BLM and all their associated issues, you are a racist. You must be an advocate. Nothing less will suffice. Because apparently racism in America is so widespread that it needs to be manufactured again and again and again. You want confirmation of that? There's a great site if you haven't been there, and I highly recommend it. Confirmation, Bubba Wallace. Okay, and I get the thing about NASCAR. Bubba Wallace didn't find it. I get it. Jussie Smollett, go to this website. This is a wonderful place. Go to fakehatecrimes.org, all one word. Fakehatecrimes.org. And now, fully cognizant of the fact that Facebook may take me off or YouTube may take me off, you know that you're having a problem with that kind of thing when you hear somebody say this.
Happens to the best of us. Don't ever forget what happened to that French actor. You know what I'm talking about? Juicy Smouillet. He's a very famous French actor. Y'all never heard of Juicy Smouillet?
Folks, when you have Dave Chappelle laughing at you, I want to tell you this. Nothing pisses off BLM and leftists more than laughing at them. And if you think Black Lives Matter over anyone else, However, in truth, you are the racist. I continue to say, and will always continue to say for decades, either everybody is equal or nobody is equal. Because we have been told for years the greatest U.S. problem is the issue of economic inequality. So, on my site, bloviatingzeppelin.net, go look at the Thomas Sowell video that I've got there. He goes on for 40 minutes, not enough time to play him all here. He talks about economic inequality. And in a word, what he's saying, in a much nicer way than I, is it's bullshit. Historically, as now, Democrats are not the friend of American blacks. Malcolm X told us that back in 1963. I found a Malcolm X. Listen to what Malcolm X is in 1983 is telling us back then about white leftists and white liberals.
And being a friend, I think, are two different things. I think there are many whites who act friendly toward Negroes. A fox acts friendly toward the lamb. And usually the fox is the one who ends up with the lamb chop on his plate. The wolf doesn't act friendly, and therefore the wolf has more difficulty in getting the lamb chop in his plate.
I'd like to point out, though, that...
And I say that because it is usually if you study the structure of the Negro community, economically, politically, civically, psychologically, and otherwise, it's controlled by the white liberal, who usually poses as the friend of the Negro, who actually differs from the white conservative in the same way that the fox differs from the wolf. I'm suspicious of whites who join Negroes and always have to be in the lead, who always have to be the head, who always have to be at the top in Negro organizations. Those whites who really have the interest of blacks at heart, let them give some advice to some Negroes and stand on the sideline. But don't join the organization and then get at the head of it and pose as a friend of Negroes.
Today, you could point to a large number of Negro leaders who have consistently betrayed Negroes in a whole host of areas.
They aren't really Negro leaders. These are puppets that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals.
Puppets who have been put in the front of the black community by leftists.
These are parrots that have been put in front of the Negro community by white liberals. You can't name me a Negro leader who has betrayed Negroes, who has not been endorsed, sanctioned, subsidized, and supported by the white liberals. But
1963, Malcolm X speaking the truth. So here's where, again, no one wants to listen. Because we're going to go into the numbers. So damn me, let's go into the numbers again.
2015, the Washington Post has maintained a comprehensive database of fatal police shootings in this country. Last year, the Post logged a total of 1,004 killings. Of the 802 shootings in which the race of the police officer and the suspect was noted, 371 of those killed were white, 236 were black. The vast majority of those killed were not, in fact, unarmed. The vast majority were armed, and African-American suspects were significantly more likely to have a deadly weapon than white suspects. Yet more white suspects were killed. Overall, there were a total of precisely 10 cases in the United States last year, according to the Washington Post, in which unarmed African-Americans were fatally shot by the police. There were 9 men and 1 woman. Now, as we said, a lot is at stake. The country is at stake.
Stop. This is one of the major reasons that Tucker Carlson is under fire. I'm sure you heard about Tucker Carlson being doxxed. If you didn't know, Tucker Carlson had leftists show up at his house while he was at work, scared the hell out of his wife and his kids. They were living in D.C. They moved. Now the New York Times is about to dox him again because they don't like his ability to speak his mind, and here he is speaking his mind. But these are facts. We can't address facts. We can't talk about facts.
So we want to take the time now to go through these case by case into the specifics. The first was a man called Chinara Feep. He was killed by a Knoxville police officer called Dylan Williams. According to Williams, Feep attacked him, choked him, and then used a taser on him, the suspect on the police officer, before the officer shot him. 5 eyewitnesses corroborated the officer's claim, and the officer was not charged. The second case concerns a man called Marcus McVeigh. He was, by any description, a career criminal from San Angelo, Texas. He'd been convicted of aggravated...
You can't say a black individual, a black man, is a career criminal. Another reason that they want to eviscerate Tucker Carlson.
assault, assault on a public servant, and organized criminal activity. At the time he was killed, he was wanted on drug dealing charges. The Texas state trooper pulled him over. McVeigh fled in his car, then he fled on foot into the woods. There he fought with a trooper and was shot and killed. The officer was not charged in that case. Marzua Scott assaulted a shop employee. When a female police officer arrived and ordered the suspect toward her car, he instead charged her and knocked her to the ground. At that point, she shot and killed him. The entire incident was caught on body camera. The officer was not charged. Ryan Twyman was being approached by 2 LA County deputies when he backed into one of them with his vehicle. The deputy was caught in the car door. He and his partner opened fire. The deputies were not charged in that case. Melvin Watkins of East Baton Rouge, Louisiana, was shot by a deputy after he allegedly drove his car toward the deputy at high speed. The deputy was not charged. Isaiah Lewis, meanwhile, wasn't just unarmed, he was completely naked. Williams broke into a house and then attacked a police officer. The police tased Williams, but he kept coming at them and attacking. The officer shot him. They were not charged. Atiana Jefferson was shot by a Fort Worth deputy called Aaron Dean. A neighbor had called a non-emergency number after seeing Johnson's door open, thinking something might be wrong. Police arrived. Johnson saw them approach from a window and was holding a gun at the time. According to body camera footage, the officer shot Johnson within seconds. Jefferson, that officer, has been charged with homicide. Christopher Whitfield was shot and killed in a place called Ethel, Louisiana. He had robbed a gas station. Deputy Glenn Sims said his gun discharged accidentally while grappling with Whitfield's. Sims, who is black himself, was not charged in that killing. Kevin Mason was shot by police during a multi-hour standoff. While Mason turned out not to have a gun, Mason claimed to have a gun, claimed to be armed, and vowed to kill police with it. They believed him. Mason had been in a shootout with police years before. And finally, the 10th case concerns Gregory Griffin. He was shot during a car chase. An officer called Giovanni Crespo claimed he saw someone pointing a gun at him. Later, a gun was in fact found inside the vehicle, and yet Officer Crespo was charged anyway with aggravated manslaughter. Those are the facts. That is the entire list from 2019.
But wait, I have more. In 2019, there were more than 10 million arrests in the United States. Of those 10 million plus arrests, 1,004 ended in the suspect being fatally shot. Most were armed. Of the 1,004 who were fatally shot, 41 were unarmed. Of the 41 unarmed suspects who were shot, 9 were black. Listen to what Tucker was just saying. 19 were white, and the other 13 were Hispanic, Asian, etc. In 2019, 89 police officers were shot and killed in the line of duty. A black man is more likely to be killed by lightning in the United States of America than by a police officer. That's a fact. Facts that the left doesn't want you to know. According to the FBI UCR, that's the Uniform Crime Reporting, there were 1,186,742 incidents of violent crime in 2018, and of them, 14,123 were homicide victims. Blacks comprised 54.9% of all homicide offenders, compared to 42.4% for whites. Blacks are 13.4% of the U.S. population, yet they accounted for more than half of all homicides. Facts. Where did I get these? Yeah, where Tucker Carlson recommended the Washington Post and FBI statistics. According to the FBI's National Incident-Based Reporting System, 61.5% of all offenders were male, and according to the FBI UCR for 2018, 87.7% of murder offenders were male. That means approximately 6% black males of the population committed approximately 50% of the murders. Stop. I'll repeat that in case you didn't grok the concept. That means approximately 6% black males, that's 6% consisting of black males of the population, committed approximately 50% of the murders, but no one can talk about that. Well, homicide isn't the only crime where the black population offends at higher rates. According to the FBI UCR, of 7,710,000 arrests reported in 2018, blacks comprised 27.4%. Approximately 28.6% of people arrested for rape were black. 54.2% of robbery arrests, 33.7% of aggravated assault arrests, 29.4% of burglary arrests, and 30% of arrests for larceny theft. Black arrest rates for violent crimes are also correlated with victim descriptions of offender races. Higher crime rates within the black population increases contact with police and therefore the chance of police shootings within that community. What does this guy know?
And then there's the problem of death. If we're going to argue logically, the argument got to hold up on both sides. All the killing in our community ain't coming from white people. Come on, say amen if you can. We are killing one another. Our old people are scared to get out at night in their own community. They're not scared of white people. They're scared of young black boys on the street. Amen. No. All the killing that's going on ain't going on in River Oaks. It's going on in South Union, in Third Ward, on Cullen and Martin Luther King. Every street that's named after Martin Luther King across America is riddled with crime and death in the name of a man who stood for nonviolence. The church has got to accept some responsibility, because we in here singing and shouting on Sunday morning. Let's get out here and go tell that young black boy and that young black girl, we gonna teach you how to love yourself more than somebody taught you how to hate yourself.
So damn this man for telling the truth. The truth that black lives really don't matter. Just some black lives. Have you heard this quote before? All black lives are equal, except that some black lives are more equal than others. That whole narrative of systemic racism. The data doesn't support the claim, and several thorough studies don't support that claim. So roll with me here. I am definitely going someplace tonight. I haven't seen one shred of evidence, and if you have, tell me. Put it in chat. Give me a link. I haven't seen one shred of evidence yet that white police officer, who doesn't need me to name him, who had his knee on George Floyd's neck, or that the other three non-white officers who helped to hold Floyd down acted out of racism. Show me that evidence. Put it in chat. So that individual was killed by these officers, but it appears to be an excessive use of force, abuse of power, and a callous disregard for that guy's health. And even that investigation, it hasn't yet concluded. Oh wait, if you don't believe Tucker Carlson, here's another guy to listen to.
Tell me what you think the most systemic racist issue is. What is it?
Well, I would say that because black people in most cases, in many cases, were descendants of slaves, that racism as an institution, that it just, a certain amount of it just exists.
2015? Give me the most blatant racist example you can come up with now.
Here we go. I think you could probably find evidence that, in general, cops are more willing to shoot if the perpetrator is black than white.
What's your basis for saying that?
Wrong.
Last year,
well, look, I know a lot of people would say, look what's going on in Chicago.
I know what they would say.
Yeah.
I'm talking about what the facts are. 965 people were shot by cops last year and killed. 4% of them were white cops shooting unarmed blacks. In Chicago in 2011,
Okay, Larry Elder isn't reading off anything. This is in his brain.
21 people were shot and killed by cops. In 2015, there were 7. In Chicago, which is a third black, a third white, and a third Hispanic, 70% of the homicides are black on black. About 40 per month, almost 500 per year last year in Chicago, and 75% of them are unsolved. Where is the Black Lives Matter on that? The idea that a racist white cop shooting unarmed black people is a peril to black people is BS. It's complete and total BS. And the reason for these so-called activists saying this is the assumption that racism remains a major problem in America.
Bingo.
The media, CNN, especially MSNBC, runs down whenever a black cop shoots somebody, and it's some march on Washington. It's ridiculous. Black people, half the homicides in this country are committed by and against black people. Last year there were 14,000 homicides.
What I said.
Not talking about suicides, I'm talking about homicides. Half of them were black, 96% of them black on black of that 7,000. Where's the Black Lives Matter people on that?
So there's where you would say that this is purely because of social justice. This is purely because they want ultimately for people to be angry enough to just keep voting Democrat.
That's right. And where's the evidence of a lack of social justice? When a black suspect is killed by a cop, believe me, the media's on it. People are watching it, and justice will, for the most part, occur.
And white officers have gone to prison and been convicted. And if convicted, they should.
In Baltimore, where Freddie Gray was killed, Freddie Gray died in a van. I shouldn't say was killed. Died in a van.
Yeah.
You have a city that's 45% black. City council is 100% Democrat. The majority of city council is black. The top cop at the time was black. The number 2 cop was black. The majority of the command staff is black. The mayor is black. The AG is black. And yet here we are talking about racism. I mean, it's absurd.
Yeah.
It's absurd.
So it's funny, I find myself caught in between this a little bit as a liberal where I want to always try to defend the others.
Wait. Do you see how he changed his tune? Now, do you think, I can't think of this guy's last name, Dave something or other. Do you think he would have changed his tune had there been a white guy sitting in that seat instead of Larry Elder? And even his worst nightmare, a sharp black guy like Larry Elder who has stats and figures right off the top of his head. Now, he's starting to come around a little bit.
So in this case, the other being black people, I'm always sympathetic to that. And that, at the same time, I hear you laying out a pretty solid case.
These are just the facts. I'll tell you something else, too. There was just a study, University of Washington. And it turns out cops were more reluctant, more hesitant to pull the trigger against a black suspect than a white suspect.
Listen to
University
this.
of Washington. And it turns out cops were more reluctant, more hesitant to pull the trigger against a black suspect than a white suspect.
That is true. That was a study. Do you ever hear anyone referring to... Of course you don't. No, of course you don't. No, you don't. And you never will. And even in 2020, slavery exists in these nations. Now, you tell me where these nations are located. You don't have to consult anything. You just inherently know. Mauritania, I wonder where that is. India, China, yeah. Uzbekistan, right. Libya, North Korea, Libya, Mauritania, I wonder where those places are. Does it begin with an A? But that's immaterial. BLM exists, as are the horrific numbers of black males shot and killed by other black males around the U.S. Like I said, go to heyjackass.com for the latest in Chicago deaths and the ones that I told you about at the beginning of the hour. You will see them all trotted out in nothing but clear, very clear, honest statistic. Ho-hum, more black lives not mattering. We'll get to that. But Democrats inherently, they're such good people. Well, they don't mock American blacks either. Do they? No.
This is what organizing looks like.
That's right.
This is what building power looks like. This is what changing the country looks like.
AOC.
I don't feel no ways tired.
Nope.
I come too far from where I started from. Nobody told me that the road would be easy. I don't believe he brought me this far to leave me.
Unchain Wall Street. They're going to put you all back in chains.
Joe Biden. Huh. Imagine that.
I'm not offended at any of these people, not at all. I think it's kind of funny, and I think that this is how low the Democrats have.
These are blacks, by the way, responding to what you just heard.
Have gone, and it's as low as they've been. This ain't really too much of a change.
I genuinely want to understand.
Candace Owens.
If you are a black person, why are you voting Democrat anymore? I mean, it's like, I could make a joke here, and we could say that it's insulting. It's actually just funny now. What is your excuse? I'm not even going to judge you. I'm not even going to talk about how low of an IQ you have to still be voting Democrat at this point. That they literally cannot have a single serious discussion with black Americans. They're just trying to relate by offering us hot sauce. That was Hillary Clinton. And now we have AOC, who's launched the hashtag Blaccent movement.
Yeah. Yeah, but no, the Democrats aren't insulting or anything. They also appear to be, situationally speaking, ambivalent about BLM being saviors or demons, depending, of course, on whose ox gets gored. Remember I told you about Schadenfreude? I hope you looked it up. This is a hefty, heaping helping of Schadenfreude, and I had to include it here tonight. Mayor celebrates BLM protests, then calls them domestic terrorism when her home is vandalized. The mayor of Olympia, Washington, Cheryl Selby, has been a vocal proponent of Black Lives Matter and a backer of the protests that has spread across the country amid the death of the man who shall not be named because nobody else can name him anymore. But when these same people vandalized her home, she called it domestic terrorism. Huh. Now, this is a June 1st, 2020 protest in Olympia, Washington. Now, she thought this was good stuff. This was fine. This was okay. The chaos was fine. But wait. Things changed then. Things changed. But it was reported recently that two groups converged in downtown Olympia, and some became destructive, burning flags, smashing windows, spray painting businesses, moving eventually over to Selby's neighborhood and vandalizing her home. The group dressed in black made its way to Selby's South Capitol neighborhood, chanting "Abolish the police" outside her home as someone spray painted BLM on her door and porch. Although now neither Selby or any part of her family were home at the time, she received text notifications from her neighbors letting her know about the vandalism. But as somebody used to say, well, here's the rest of the story. Here's the best part. Here's the best of the rest. Selby said, I'm really trying to process this. It's like domestic terrorism. It's unfair. It hurts when you're giving so much to your community, she added. Poor baby. They are terrorists. Laid down with Marxists and socialists and communists, and you're going to get used and then discarded like a bloody Kotex. You didn't see that coming? Make no mistake, BLM co-founder Patrisse Cullors. She has stated quite clearly she is an avowed Marxist. She will tell you that all day long. I also
think that it might... I think of a lot of things. The first thing I think is that we actually do have an ideological frame. Myself and Alicia in particular are trained organizers. Yeah. We are trained Marxists. We are super versed on sort of ideological theories. And I think that what we really try to do is build a movement that could be utilized by many, many Black folk.
She's a trained Marxist. Remember I told you that this wasn't about BLM. It wasn't about some guy whose name nobody remembers anymore. This is about communism. This is how we're getting here. Tonight, by me telling you these stories, piece by piece by piece by piece. And here's where we are.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Trained Marxists. She said, and she called, if I'd played it all there, comrades. The buzzword from the USSR. What a success story the USSR was also. There's the real story about BLM.
What's up, world, and welcome to another edition of I Mix What I Like here at the Real News Network. I'm Jared Ball in Baltimore. After the 2012 killing of Trayvon Martin, 3 Black women, Alicia Garza, Opal Tometi, and our guest this segment, Patrisse Cullors, formed what has since become the global phenomenon of Black Lives Matter. Patrisse Cullors is an artist, organizer, and a freedom fighter. She is also founder of Dignity and Power Now, and she has worked tirelessly promoting law enforcement accountability and continues to as my main man, Peace Justice Universal, a.k.a. DJ U-Rock, a.k.a. Pedro used to say, upset the setup. Patrisse Cullors, welcome to the show. Thank you for joining us.
Thanks for having me.
So Patrisse, for those who may have just been introduced to you in a most direct way at the Netroots conference intervention you conducted, please help them and us see past what appears, from my point of view, to have been a tremendous amount of appropriation and suppression of you, Opal, and Alicia as founders, and the particular brand of radical Black gender and sexuality politics you all work with. So if you would, please summarize for us how you see the origins, politics, and purpose of Black Lives Matter.
And no, we're not going to go into that because I really couldn't care less about that. There are more parts that I do care about. The interesting part, earlier this week, a report was released that claimed the national arm of BLM spent millions of dollars on travel and compensation over the past 3 fiscal years, but only 6% of BLM spending went to local chapters and grassroots organizations. I wonder where the rest of it went. I think you have a pretty damn good idea. Also, here's a very interesting point about, or revealed by, fact checkers. Air quotes. If you're watching the video, this is an air quote. Fact checkers. Fact checkers. Black Lives Matter, not recognized IRS charity, raises funds through fiscal sponsors. I wonder how that goes. Earlier this month, factcheck.org and PolitiFact confirmed BLM Global Network is not a recognized IRS charity. Instead, they raised their funds through a fiscal sponsor, global nonprofit, 1,000 Currents, which would likely have a legal obligation to make reasonable efforts to ensure that the funds they receive were spent consistent with 501c3 restrictions. Here's another funny little aspect to all of it. Haven't you been on social media and come across people that say, when I donate to BLM, and I think I'm donating to BLM, it ships me over someplace else. Then it ships me to another place, and then it goes over to the Democrat Party. Anybody besides me think that sounds like a Ponzi scheme? Just me, holding up my hand. But now things are starting to expand, and there are direct linkages with BLM, and they become more exposed. This is from frontpagemag.com. Minnesota State Representative Antifa and Muslim groups plan to police Minneapolis under Muslim rule. I told you about that a couple of shows ago. Listen to one of my prior shows. A little bit more in depth than now. So, Sharia law on the streets of America aided and abetted by BLM and their contingents. These are stepping stones. Think stepping stones on the way to an ultimate goal. if you listen really carefully, BLM and their linkages are telling you exactly what they want. They'll fight over the scraps later. Could it be Islam versus communism? Who's going to win? Who's the weakest? Who's the weakest? That's who's going to lose. You see how that one guy's name really doesn't matter now? And just like communism, BLM is coming for your religion. Any religion. Every religion. Except Islam. Always know what your enemy is thinking. Here's my copy of the Communist Manifesto by Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Get a copy. Read it. Understand what communism is all about. This is your enemy on paper. Know it. Read it. The Communist Manifesto by Marx and Engels fully recognizes there can be no religion in a communist regime. Government has to become that religion. Sean King, otherwise known as Talcum X, he's a massive supporter of BLM, called for the eradication of religious artifacts. White religious artifacts. Tear them all down. BLM activist Sean King calls for destruction of Jesus Christ statues. Churches represent white supremacy, oppression, and racist propaganda. And again, in the Bible, Sean King says, when the family of Jesus wanted to hide and blend in, guess where they went? Egypt, not Denmark. So, tear them down. That's what Sean King says. You see how this stuff all ties together. It all dovetails. Well, you want to hear another thing? I've played this before, but it's so good not to play it again. Here's Hawk Newsom, a BLM advocate. And I believe in this one, he's talking to Martha McCallum. And this has had some problems playing in the past. Let's see if it plays. Oh, here we go.
New York. Good to have you with us tonight, sir. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
Thank you for having me.
So, obviously, people watch what you say in that video that you want to now shove legislation down people's throats now that you have everyone's attention. And you also have said that violence is sometimes necessary in these situations. What exactly is it that you hope to achieve through violence?
Listen, he'll tell you.
Wow. It's interesting that you would pose that question like that, because this country is built upon violence. What was the American Revolution? What's our diplomacy across the globe? We go in and we blow up countries and we replace their leaders with leaders who we like. So for any American to accuse us of being violent, it's extremely hypocritical. Now, when we talk about violence, we talk about using self-defense. Why are you screaming and not allowing me to talk, ma'am? You asked me a question, allow me to answer. I'm in the process of answering, and I won't be that much longer.
I'm listening.
Okay?
I believe him.
You asked what we hope to achieve. We're talking about self-defense. We're talking about 4 or 5 police officers choking someone.
Josh Kemp in Facebook chat says, hey, is this the New York head of BLM? And yes, you're absolutely right. Hawk Newsom, this is the guy.
To death, and someone from the community having the training to intervene effectively. We're talking about saving lives. Nobody's talking about ambushing police officers. We're talking about protecting lives. And there's nothing more American than that. And when we talk about uplifting and upholding the Second Amendment, I think that you should be applauding me.
Okay, do you understand what he's saying? That blacks are going to be the police in their own community. They don't need police. They don't want police. Please make sure you understand that concept.
Seeing as though you guys are huge supporters of the Second Amendment, but it seems to be the hypocrisy of America that when black people start talking about arming themselves and defending themselves, the talk is violence. But when white people grab assault rifles and go to our nation's, their state's capitals, it's all good.
All right.
Oh, like BLM went to Stony Mountain, like that, Hawk Newsom. Oh, because that never happens.
First of all, I've never talked about my stance on the Second Amendment. I'm not criticizing you or praising you.
You don't support the Second Amendment? You don't support the Second Amendment?
That's not my role here to talk about my opinion.
I'm asking you a question. Do you support the Second Amendment?
The Second Amendment is part of our Constitution.
Do you support the Second Amendment, yes or no? A lot of your viewers would like to know if you support the Second Amendment.
Well, that's fine. But that's not why we're here. And the only reason that I posed that first question to you the way that I did was that I watched you talking on a bunch of different interviews today. And you said, burn it down. You said...
Okay, now we're coming to the crux of the biscuit. Jeremy Hansen, who has a great show. He'll be back very soon in a new studio. I love your microphone. I don't know what it is, but I love your microphone. It's a blue something or other. I didn't get the model. Anyway, Jeremy Hansen says he'd like to have Hawk Newsome on his show, but he's not going to answer him. I wonder why, Jeremy.
Burn it down. It's time. So that makes me think that you want to burn it down.
I said if this country doesn't give us what we want, then we will burn down this system and replace it.
If this country doesn't give us what we want, we're going to burn it down. And behind whose philosophy would that be? That's why you're here tonight listening to me. Who's funding Black Lives Matter? That would be George Soros and the contingent, the numerous organizations that are under him as well.
Welcome, everyone. I'm Spiro. Thanks for tuning in. Black Lives Matter has been dominating the headlines for weeks, and there's been a lot of speculation regarding the funding of this organization, with many fingers quick to point at George Soros. So the million-dollar question, did Soros fund Black Lives Matter? Yes, he absolutely did. Oh, yeah. And I'll get to more of that in a minute. But George Soros is not the only source of funding for Black Lives Matter. In fact, Soros and his funding is just another spoke in the wheel of a massive, well-financed, politically motivated campaign with the desired goal to transform this current system of control and destroy it, basically, and out of the ashes of that, build a new system of control. This certainly sounds like a reoccurring theme right now. Very similar to what we've been hearing from the United Nations, the World Economic Forum, the central banks, and governments from around the world.
And it's also the Cloward-Piven effect. Go look up the Cloward-Piven effect. Cloward, I think it was George Cloward and Francis Fox Piven, two massive leftists in the 60s. Cloward, C-L-O-W-A-R-D, Piven, P-I-V-E-N, the Cloward-Piven effect. Go find out what that is. In a nutshell, what it is this: taxing the system, any system, to the point where it devolves and collapses amongst itself. It cannot take the crush. It cannot take the pressure. Then you rebuild upon that. That's what's being done to the America that you and I know and the America that you and I love. Look up Cloward-Piven.
As they are preparing for the Great Reset and a global paradigm shift, which we'll get back to later in this video. But right now, we're going to look at who exactly is funding Black Lives Matter. According to their website, Black Lives Matter was founded in 2013 in response to the acquittal of Trayvon Martin's murderer. Black Lives Matter Foundation Incorporated is a global organization in the United States, the UK, and Canada whose mission is to eradicate white supremacy and build local power, to intervene in violence inflicted on black communities by the state and vigilantes.
Now, please notice that he didn't say that it's a 501c3, it's not a charity, and that's really important. Then I found this article. You got to scour through the internet, folks. And by the way, as an observation, have you not noticed that especially in Google, exactly what you're looking for in Google is primarily not easily found anymore? It will give you all the leftist crap that you could possibly want, but something that you know exists that is in there either is not available for you, it's not on the top, you have to dig, you have to search for it, or you have to know where the originating article was in the first place, which is why when I do these shows, all the articles that I'm using for all of these shows, I bookmark the hell out of because I don't want to have to depend upon Google to find them again. Google will bury them. And that is purposeful. From Neon Nettle, I found this. Soros plows $220 million into radical BLM groups and anti-police movements. This was from an article July the 13th. Open Society Foundations makes massive investment into radical groups. George Soros's Open Society Foundations has announced $220 million donations to radical BLM, justice organizations across the United States. The most significant share of the investment is $150 million, which will be via grants to black-led organizations focused on racial equality, the organization announced. On Monday, the Open Society Foundation added the donations aid the movement to end policing as we know it. What they really mean is, well, just end policing. According to the Open Society Foundation statement, we're honored to be able to carry out the vital work of fighting for rights, dignity, and equity for oppressed people the world over, started by our founder and chair, George Soros. Who was behind George Soros from the very beginning? Who advocated for him every step of the way? A man whose goal has always been the ruination and destruction of the United States of America. I'll give you one guess.
It is not enough for America's future that some participate and others don't. We have been given an extraordinary blessing.
Yeah.
And at this moment in time, our country needs us. And we need people like George Soros, who is fearless and willing to step up when it counts. So please join me in welcoming George Soros.
Yay, George. Yay, George. Because that's all you need if you're a leftist, is good old Hungarian George.
This is the first time that I feel that I need to stand up and do something really and become really engaged in the electoral process.
Yeah, that's George Soros. And Maria in Facebook chat says, is that Hillary? And my answer is, you bet it is. She has advocated for George Soros all along. Probably shouldn't be saying this, but is there anybody besides me who can't wait for George Soros to cack? I'm holding my hand up. But wait, there's more. Who else is funding? Revealed. Ford Motors makes millions of dollars from police cruisers, while the Ford Foundation donates millions to defund the police. Now, if I had a producer, you would have heard spends millions to defund the police. But that's not what you heard because I don't have a producer. Ford Motors built America's first police cruiser in 1950. The company now holds 65% of that market share, by the way, in their Ford Explorer and a couple of other vehicles, Expeditions, etc. In New York City, though, the Ford Foundation is taking part in the Defund the Police movement on its website. For the first time since 1976, a member of the Ford Motors dynasty sits on that board of foundation. Henry Sonny Ford joined the Ford Foundation's board of trustees in February 2019 to help drive its racial justice agenda. So the Ford Foundation, founded by Henry Ford, sells cops cop cars, but its foundation wants to kill cops. Oh, did I tell you that Henry Ford originally was one of the largest racists around? BLM doesn't exist to really, this is part of my point, my whole point. BLM does not exist to truly assist black Americans. It exists to further its own agenda of destruction, not creation, oppression, not freedom, goose-stepping, solitary mindthink, not questions, or any kind of opposing viewpoints whatsoever. And so after a while, why aren't we asking ourselves, we should ask ourselves, was any of this stuff truly spontaneous? Where was the spontaneity of it? You know, like that video that caused Benghazi, the spontaneous attack on our consulate. Or has it been planned for some time? Those who listen to the show, you've heard me say this about Quinky Dink. I don't really believe in it much anymore. I have been disabused somewhat violently of believing in Quinky Dink. Further, is it just about BLM? About a guy whose name really doesn't trip off the tongue of anybody anymore? After 57 days. So what else? What else could it possibly be about?
We actually do have an ideological frame. We are trained Marxists.
This could be a police cruiser, Tom, that you mentioned that is burning right now.
I just don't even know why there aren't uprisings all over the country. Maybe there will be.
Flames ripped through the lower level of St. John's Church.
And as you can see,
Pelosi advocating for violence.
The police departments are defunded.
We need to completely dismantle the Minneapolis Police Department.
The driver hit 2 officers.
We have an incredible opportunity to fundamentally transform the country.
The first statue that we came across was Ulysses Grant. It was toppled. It was lying in the pathway.
Look what you did to my store.
Now, these people are tearing up our livelihood.
This isn't about justice.
We are trained Marxists.
It's about destroying America. It's about communism. So let's start connecting some dots. Let's start tying some links together and doing what I call BZ's logical extension. There's a guy named Charles Faddis. He wrote on June, I think it was 25th. We are now weeks into what amounts to a nationwide insurrection. Monuments have been defaced, statues toppled, and the commercial centers of our great cities have been gutted. Yet throughout all of this, most of our mass media has characterized violence and lawlessness as an unprecedented scale of peaceful protests. The scope of the destruction has been concealed. The demands of the anarchists and the Marxists rampaging across America, seemingly systematically mischaracterized simply as demands for justice and reform. Purposely, because as we know, the American media maggots are hard at work against Trump. That's their job. 24/7. Some of the explanations, no doubt, lie in the fact that much of what has passed for mainstream media is simply so blind in its hate for Donald Trump that it's going to support anybody and anything that seems to oppose him. There are other factors at work, though. And some of what is transpiring may, in fact, be due to a decidedly anti-American agenda. Hold that thought. This is where I'm going. It's my job to tie this all up for you tonight. And the desire of a particular foreign actor to not only damage this great nation, but to promote its own particular ideology. The Chinese Communist Party, the CCP, uses propaganda and influence operatives as a means of projecting its power and weakening its enemies. Chief among the targets for that kind of operation is the United States. These operations are not run on some kind of ad hoc basis. They are coordinated and they are directed at a national level by the CCP's Communist Chinese Party United Front Work Department. It is critical for us to understand that America's greatest enemy isn't Russia, but China. China is our enemy. The CCP's United Front system mobilizes the party's friends to strike the party's enemies. The system has existed for a long time, but it's been greatly energized and expanded in recent years by none other than Xi Jinping. Now stop. Last Thursday night, go back and listen to the show. 2 hours of Lily Tang Williams telling you what it was like under Chinese rule under Mao Zedong. Go back to last Thursday night show. It's a great show with Lily Tang Williams. She lived under communism. Hers was a cautionary tale about what is coming here. It operates freely and openly inside foreign political parties, colleges, corporations, all with the goal of promoting the party's interests. The Communist Chinese. The express goals of the United Front system include undermining social cohesion, exacerbating racial tensions, and influencing politics. You've heard of these, but I'll mention these again. Confucius Institutes. Offices known as Confucius Institutes on dozens of U.S. campuses have long-standing informal ties with the United Front Work Department. There are 81 institutions like that in the United States. No one cares. The express purpose of those institutes is to shape American attitudes towards the CCP and communisms. The institutes are staffed by Chinese nationals. Their purpose within the United Front system is to feed American students and faculty members positive images of communism and the Chinese Communist Party. The students, whose minds are shaped then obviously, go on to careers, not only in academia, but all throughout America, including the media as well. Let's bottom line this. The CCP owns the Communist Chinese Party, owns vast interests in the America media maggots. You want to be staggered by the depths of the betrayal? I have an example right here. The New York Times. Carlos Slim is a Mexican billionaire. He owns 17.4% of the company, New York Times, and votes for 1/3 of the board. Carlos Slim from Mexico has massive business dealings with Chinese companies tied to the CCP. Among those ties is Huawei, which is currently subject to U.S. sanctions for espionage and actions detrimental to American national security. The New York Times is in the tank. The Washington Post. In 2013, American CEO and billionaire Jeff Bezos purchased the Washington Post for $250 million. Bezos has direct and massive ties to the Chinese market, which is controlled by the CCP, Chinese Communist Party. The production of Amazon's most particularly popular products, like the Echo and the Kindle, takes place almost exclusively in Chinese factories, where they use slave labor, Nike. So when you purchase a Washington Post subscription, it comes with an advertising supplement called China Watch. This supplement is supplied courtesy of China Daily, a Chinese state-run media outlet, Washington Post. How about CNN? The company is owned by and run by Warner Media. That has significant financial and organizational ties to the Chinese Communist Party. Warner Media is invested in China Media Capital, CMC. It's a media company overseen by the Chinese Communist Party. CNN, via its president, Jeff Zucker, is involved with NBA broadcasts into China and effects and efforts to expand NBA programming in China. MSNBC and NBC. Remember all this stuff. Remember who writes what about China. MSNBC and NBC. Both MSNBC and NBC News are operated by NBC Universal. It's a company with a huge financial tie to the Chinese Communist Party. NBC is in partnership with China's state-run media organization. Xinhua has been identified by the U.S. State Department as a foreign mission, meaning it is completely an arm of the Chinese Communist Party and does not function as an independent news outlet. NBC's Universal's Oriental DreamWorks is fully owned by a Chinese investment group. How about ABC? Walt Disney and ESPN are both owned by ABC. Both companies have large investments in the Chinese economy. In 2019, when the NBA refused to denounce Chinese actions in Hong Kong, ESPN's senior news director instructed the network staff to avoid discussing Chinese politics or matters related to Hong Kong. Do you think any of these outlets can be fair? Bloomberg. Both former New York City Mayor Michael Bloomberg and his company Bloomberg LP are heavily invested in China. Bloomberg LP sells terminals to the website in the Chinese market and helps finance Chinese companies by sending billions of dollars from U.S. investors to the Chinese bond market. Bloomberg LP supports 364 Chinese firms. Of these, 159 are owned by the Chinese Communist Party. In 2014, Bloomberg killed an investigation into the finances of the Chinese Communist Party elite. When the story was ready for publication, editor-in-chief Michael Winkler crushed it, saying, it is for sure going to, invite the Communist Party to, completely shut us down and kick us out of the country. So I just don't see that as a story that's justified. So you heard it here first. ABC in the tank for the Chi-Coms. Bloomberg in the tank for the Chi-Coms. MSNBC and NBC in the tank for the Chi-Coms. CNN in the tank for the Chi-Coms. New York Times in the tank for the Chi-Coms. Starting to see the links now? Also, one of the co-founders... I went beyond, so I want to remind everybody what you're listening to right here, okay?
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
So, we know that Opal Tometi, who is a co-founder of BLM, she is deep into communist philosophy. She's a great and ardent lover of all things Maduro. And there's a picture of her with Venezuelan communist Nicolas Maduro himself. What a great guy he is. I found this article. You gotta dig to get this stuff. And I found one that is very revelatory about BLM and who started him. This is from panampost.com. I don't usually quote this. I had to dig long and hard to find this stuff. The links between Black Lives Matter and Nicolas Maduro revealed. Nicolas Maduro, the communist, socialist ruler of Venezuela that's deteriorating, sitting on billions and billions and billions, possibly trillions of dollars of oil, but won't do anything about it. The links between Black Lives Matter and Nicolas Maduro. The organization's founders are avowed Marxists, more interested in ideology than in solving racial inequality. BLM purportedly exists to combat the alleged racism inherent in America's police force. Police abuse against black citizens is the very reason for the organization. Yet, at the Pan Am Post, they found that while BLM claimed to oppose police abuse and racism around the world, the organization is simultaneously a great supporter of some of the world's most brutal and repressive dictators. In particular, the founders of BLM have been really good and staunch supporters of allies of Venezuelan dictator Nicolas Maduro and, the Castro regime in Cuba. So, Opal Tometi, take it away, okay? In December of 2015, BLM sent a delegation headed by the organization's co-founder Opal Tometi to act as observers during the Venezuelan parliamentary elections of that year. Because that sounds like a good thing to do. Sympathy with Maduro. Seems to me that Opal Tometi is down with the sickness. So, BLM's massive claim to fame, though, and its own name are derived from a premise that is proven to be completely false. Hands up, don't shoot. Police don't kill proportionally more black men than they do white men. And the organization really has a lot of explaining to do regarding its support and collaboration with murderous, tyrannical regimes like Cuba, like Maduro. And all of those regimes are absolutely intent on harming Americans of all colors. It's stunning that some of America's most renowned business leaders have chosen to ignore the evidence and the glaring intent of BLM founders to promote Marxism and their so-called revolution in the United States, and that has nothing to do with race and everything to do with ideology. So, Somali representative Ilhan Omar, Jack in Chat, says the BLM flag is a ripoff of the communist flag. It sure as hell is. Somali Representative Ilhan Omar, who unlawfully married her brother to achieve entry into this country, everybody knows it, and who's being investigated by the DOJ for campaign fraud and tax fraud, she's at least honest when she reveals her real intent for the United States of America, the country she cheated to enter but hates with her very, very soul.
As long as our economy and political systems prioritize profit without considering who is profiting, who is being shut out, we will perpetuate this inequality. So we cannot stop at criminal justice system. We must begin the work of dismantling the whole system of oppression wherever we find it.
Translated, we're going to take America down. The America that opened me and welcomed me with open arms is the same one that I want to tear the hell down. Dismantle everything. Now, I'm sure you're seeing how so many seemingly disparate elements, they, again, somehow magically dovetail into one kind of a semi-united front that's becoming more united all the time. Nothing is about creation. Everything is about destruction. Then there's more about how communists are arming their brothers in BLM to commit acts of violence against Americans. You probably didn't hear about this. U.S. authorities uncover massive nationwide weapons trafficking ring run by communist China to arm BLM terrorists with powerful weapons of war. On July 3rd of this year, Natural News reported communist China was trafficking fully automatic weapons and their parts into Florida in a way to arm BLM terrorists in advance of a planned armed uprising. U.S. Customs and Border Protection, CBP, stopped that and seized a shipment of over 10,000 full auto upgrade parts that convert semi-auto rifles into full automatic weapons. According to the CBP, from June 26th, the shipment originated in Shenzhen, China, and was destined for a residence in Melbourne, Florida. Inside the shipment was over 10,000 small machine parts that function as full auto drop-in upgrades for AR-15s. So they were able to determine this operation was part of an attempt by communist China to destabilize the United States by arming BLM terrorists. Didn't hear about that. Haven't heard about that. You're not supposed to hear about that. So make no mistakes about the goals of the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. There is an attempt to rape the U.S. for all of her proprietary industrial secrets, create weakness and chaos, destroy the nation, install communism, and make what used to be the United States into a puppet for communist China, a satellite thereof, if you will. So let's talk socialism and communism, because this is where the rubber meets the road. Let's talk about that little book that I showed you, written by a guy named Marx, and it isn't Groucho, and Engels. Let's talk about that.
Marx and Friedrich Engels. They preached a new faith for a skeptical age, and it spread faster than any religion in history. Tonight, we continue our series, The Unauthorized History of Socialism.
And socialism and communism is meant, do not mistake this, it is meant to take the place of religion.
With the story of their Communist Manifesto.
In January 1848, students and workers took to the streets of Palermo. By February, the revolt had spread to Paris. Soon, nearly 50 uprisings engulfed the European continent, from Russia to the English Channel. Marx and Engels rushed home to Germany to join the barricades. They had just finished writing a platform for a workers' organization based in London. The pamphlet would become known as the Communist Manifesto. The timing of its publication would forever link it to revolution, adding to its mystique. Soon, the world would learn the central premise of Marxism. that the existence of all hitherto existing society is the history of class struggles.
For Marx and Engels, the heart of the system of capitalism was exploitation. As they saw it, the workers were the ones who were creating the things that were coming out of the factories, but the capitalists were the ones who were keeping most of the profits. What they talked about was the means of production, the Marxist term for the machinery, the factories, and this was terribly unjust. And the only way to rectify it was for the workers to get together and take the factories away from the capitalists.
See any fundamental flaws here?
So that they could have the complete benefit of the products that they themselves were creating.
The Communist Manifesto predicted that as capitalism progressed, the working class would become so large and so poor that revolution would be inevitable. The result? Socialism, a new workers' state, where people contributed according to their ability and received according to their need.
Hold that thought. Denmark is going to be weighing in just a moment.
In time, government itself would become unnecessary and give way to a new stateless society Marx and Engels called communism.
What Marx...
Okay, stop right there. You need to understand this very primordial, fundamental concept. When anyone is talking to you or approaching you about socialism, socialism is the first step to communism. And you are going to learn tonight, in the remaining half hour or so, the difference between socialism, capitalism, and communism. But when anybody talks to you about socialism, understand, you must understand that that is leading into communism, and that's where they're going. That's the point.
Don't worry. Whatever happens to you, no matter how miserable your lives are, no matter how desperate your political struggle seems, history is working its way towards this outcome. And that's what gives Marxism its incredible force.
Many socialists bought the argument. The Communist Manifesto would go on to become one of the most influential pamphlets ever published, with translations in every major European language by the turn of the century. You can watch the...
And I tell you, I'll show it to you again if you're watching on video. Here's my copy. Now, it's not a pamphlet. This particular book has tons and tons of reading inside. You can see it's not just a pamphlet. There's a lot of information in here. This is a great copy. Get one for yourself. The Communist Manifesto, Karl Marx and Friedrich Engels. Read it. Know what the enemy wants for you. BLM is the enemy. BLM wants this for you. Now, I'm just dealing with BLM tonight. There are other elements involved in all of this, of course. Note this. Clear thinkers realize already that if BLM's cause was really a fight against actual racism, why hasn't the movement not fully divested itself from one of history's most prolific racists? Who would that be? Karl Marx. Marx and his contemporaries and his really good friend Friedrich Engels are, of course, the fathers of the most murderous of political philosophies, communism. Communist tyrants have murdered well over 100 million people. I would add another 50 million as well, because I don't know if this is included in the amount. If you listened to Lily Tang Williams last Thursday night, she stated, because she was there in China, communist China, under Mao Zedong, the statistic that communist China did not want you to know, and the statistic that leftists don't want you to know, is the fact, as she delineated between 1959 and 1961, 45 million Chinese citizens died of starvation. Add that to your 100 million people that have died under communism. So, I don't know, 150 million? 6 million Jews died in World War II. There are people that don't believe that occurred. Child's play compared to communism. Both Marx and Engels were notorious for their racist ideas. Both of these guys viewed blacks specifically as lesser human beings, and they were more closely related to the animal kingdom than to other races. Does that sound familiar to another individual I just referred to earlier in this show tonight, who's black? Yeah, it sure does. Marx and Engels believed that race was a primary determinant for somebody's economic status and ability. So, using that belief, they developed a system by which they radicalized skin color groups, ethnicities, nations, and social classes, while endowing them with certain innate superior and inferior characteristics. There's a guy named Eric Van Ree of the Institute for East European Studies of the University of Amsterdam. This is his quote. He says, they regarded race as part of the humanity's natural conditions upon which the production system rested. Races endowed with superior qualities would boost economic development and productivity, while the less endowed ones would hold humanity back. Just like Margaret Sanger, the creator of Planned Parenthood, believed fully in black genocide, and we embrace Planned Parenthood today. That's not very BLM-like, though, is it? Old Marx? Old Engels? I submit to you, that's because BLM is at its very core four things. Three things. It's racist, it's stupid, and it's ignorant. Oh, four things. Let me throw in violent. But like most leftists, this is cultivated and this is purposeful. Okay, we have capitalism right now in the United States of America. Capitalism evil. Well, let's talk about a comparison of capitalism versus socialism. Now, in this audio cut, I mentioned Denmark earlier. Listen to what somebody happens to say about Denmark, because Denmark isn't Denmark usually used by leftists as this is the ideal of socialism. What a wonderful country Denmark is. That socialist Denmark country. Well, let's talk about capitalism versus socialism, shall we?
Capitalism versus socialism. We can sum up each economic system in one line. Capitalism is based on human greed. Socialism is based on human need, right? No. Wrong. So wrong. It's exactly backwards. And I'll prove it to you. Been on Amazon lately? Each of the thousands of products Amazon offers represents the work of people who believe they have something you want or need. If they're right, they prosper. If they're wrong, they don't. That's how the free market works. It encourages people to improve their lives by satisfying the needs of others. No one starts a business making a thing or providing a service for themselves. They start a business to make things or provide services for others. I speak from personal experience. When I was the CEO of the company that owns Carl's Jr. and Hardee's restaurant chains, we spent millions.
Okay, I got to point this out in Facebook chat. Jimmy Collins says Denmark isn't socialist. Let me put this paperclip on here right now. And let me put this down over here. And let me do this for Jimmy Collins' remark that Denmark isn't socialist. Correctamundo, my good man. Absolutely.
Billions of dollars every year trying to determine what customers wanted. If our customers didn't like something, we changed it, and fast. Because if we didn't, our competitors would, pun intended, eat us for lunch.
Yep.
The consumer, that's you, has the ultimate power. In effect, you vote with every dollar you spend. In a socialist economy, the government has the ultimate power. It decides what you get from a limited supply it decides should exist. Instead of millions of people making millions of decisions about what they want, a few people, government elites, decide what people should have and how much they should pay for it. Not surprisingly, they always get it wrong. Have you ever noticed that late-stage socialist failures always run out of essential items like toilet paper? Of course, this isn't a problem for those who have the right connections with the right people. Those chosen few get whatever they want. but everyone else is out of luck. Venezuela, once the richest country in South America, is the most recent example of socialism driving a prosperous country into an economic ditch. Now, maybe you think it's an unfair example. I'm not sure why, but okay. We'll ignore the fact that leftist activists celebrated it as a great socialist success. Wasn't. But what about Western European countries? Don't they have socialist economies?
Oh, here we go.
People seem pretty happy there.
Yeah.
Why can't we have what they have?
Right.
Free health care, free college, stronger unions.
Yeah.
Good question. And the answer may surprise you. There are no socialist countries in Western Europe. Most are just as capitalist as the United States.
Wait. That's not what you're taught. That's not what leftists say.
The only difference, and it's a big one, is that they offer more government benefits than the U.S. does. We can argue about the cost of these benefits and the point at which they reduce individual initiative, thus doing more harm than good.
Taxes.
Scandinavians have been debating those questions for years. But only a free market capitalist economy can produce the wealth necessary to sustain all of the supposedly free stuff Europeans enjoy. To get the free stuff, after all, you have to create enough wealth to generate enough tax revenue to pay for everything the government gives away. Without capitalism, you're Venezuela. In a 2015 speech at Harvard, Denmark's prime minister took great pains to make this point. I know that some people in the U.S. associate the Nordic model with socialism. Therefore, I would like to make one thing clear. Denmark is far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy. So when you point to Denmark as a paragon of socialism, you're really singing the praises of capitalism. The more capitalism, the less socialism you need.
Let me repeat. For those of you who just may have tuned in, Denmark said about itself, it's far from a socialist planned economy. Denmark is a market economy.
Look at America since 2017. A policy of lower taxes and less government regulation, that's more capitalism, has led to a robust economic expansion, something thought impossible just a few years earlier. Unemployment, notably among minority groups typically most at risk for poverty, is at a generational low. Economic expansion gets people off welfare and into work. That's less socialism. None of this requires a degree in economics. Common sense is all you need. That's why it's so frustrating to see young people praising socialism and criticizing capitalism. It's bad enough that they're working against their own interests, better job prospects, better wages, personal freedom. But they're also working against the interest of the less fortunate. Capitalism leads to economic democracy. Socialism leads to the economic dictatorship of the elite. Always and everywhere. So beware what you ask for. You just might get it. I'm Andy Puzder, the author of The Capitalist Comeback for Prager University.
If you haven't been to Prager University, you are doing yourself a disservice by not going there. And so we have to ask ourselves, what about this Karl Marx guy? We heard something about him. Who is he? And what's he want? Why do people continue to desire what Karl Marx was offering? Why is that?
Ideas have consequences, sometimes good, sometimes bad, and sometimes catastrophic, like the ideas of Karl Marx. Born in Trier, Germany in 1818, Marx didn't invent communism. But it was on his ideas that Lenin and Stalin built the Soviet Union, Mao built communist China, and innumerable other tyrants, from the Kims in North Korea to the Castros in Cuba, built their communist regimes.
Trust me, I am definitely going somewhere tonight with all of this. We're not far. We're not far.
Ultimately, those regimes and movements calling themselves Marxist murdered about 100 million people and enslaved more than 1 billion. Marx believed that workers, specifically those who did manual labor, were exploited by capitalists, the people who owned, as Marx put it, the means of production, specifically factories, but who did very little physical labor themselves. Only a workers' revolution, Marx wrote in Das Kapital, could correct this injustice. What would that revolution look like? Marx and his collaborator Friedrich Engels spelled it out point by point in the Communist Manifesto. It included the abolition of property and inheritance and the centralization of credit, communication, and transport in the hands of the state, and a lot more along the same lines. In other words, the state owned.
Did you hear what he said? The elimination of property and inheritance. The elimination of private property.
Hands of the state, and a lot more along the same lines. In other words, the state owns and controls pretty much everything. This notion was widely discussed and debated in European intellectual circles during Marx's lifetime, but nothing much came of it until Vladimir Lenin took power in Russia in 1917. This changed everything. Despite its repeated economic failures, Lenin's Russia, which became known as the Soviet Union, became the model for dictators around the world. Wherever Marx's ideas were practiced, life got worse. Not by a little, but by a lot. There is not a single exception to this rule. Not the Soviet Union, not Eastern Europe, not China, not North Korea, not Vietnam, not Cuba, not Venezuela, not Bolivia, not Zimbabwe. Wherever Marxism goes, economic collapse, terror, and famine follow. So, if cataclysmic failure, meaning terrible human suffering, is the inevitable legacy of Marxism, why do so many people, and now especially young people, defend it? The most common answer Marxism's advocates offer is that they, whoever they are, Lenin, Stalin, Chavez, never really practiced Marxism. They all somehow got it wrong.
Whoa.
Marxism, we are told, is, at its essence, about sharing what we have, from each according to his ability to each according to his needs, as Marx put it. Maybe that sounds good to you, but what does it mean? Who determines ability? Who determines need? The answer is the state, the ruling elite. Under Marxism, that's who has all the power.
Listen, the state has all the power in communism. You are the people, but you, as the people, do not make up the state. The state has the power, meaning the government. Not you, the government.
That's why the truth is this. Marxist dictators like Lenin, Mao, and Pol Pot really did get Marxism right. They wanted absolute power, and Marxism gave them the way to get it. Karl Marx never had to face the consequences of his theories. He lived most of his adult life breathing the free air of London, England, living off the generosity of his collaborator and patron, Engels, who, as it happens, inherited his money from his wealthy merchant father.
Now do you see how the schadenfreude and hypocrisy that I've delineated before also comes into play here? These people want this for you, but they don't want to live under it themselves.
Marx spent his days in the reading room of the British Museum, researching and writing. Although he was obsessed with the term scientific, he was never able to marshal data to prove his theories. There's a good reason for this. There was no data to prove his theories. For all his time in the library, Marx couldn't find any evidence to suggest that capitalism, the free exchange of goods and services through privately owned business, was a passing phase. Throughout the industrial age, working conditions constantly improved and wealth expanded. Marx had to rely on outdated reports to make his case. And even then, he had to manipulate the data to get it to conform to his predetermined theories.
Does that sound like Wuhan 19? BZ, is that foreshadowing of what's to come this Thursday night? Hey, it might be.
But Marx really had no interest in proving his theories. He knew that they could be put into practice only by brute force. He said so himself. Of course, in the beginning, communism cannot be effected except by means of despotic inroads, he wrote. His ends could be attained only by the forcible overthrow of all existing social conditions. All existing social conditions.
Does that sound familiar in 2020?
That's religion, family, personal possessions, freedom, and democracy. They all had to go in order to achieve Marx's vision of an earthly paradise. But since
religion, family, gone.
Since few people give up their liberties and property voluntarily, creating a Marxist state has always required guns, prisons, and summary executions. Marx's many disciples from Lenin on never considered this a problem.
And therein lies the cautionary tale about the Second Amendment and why the Second Amendment is so critical to freedom and life in America.
Some, like revolutionary poster boy Che Guevara, considered it a bonus. I don't need proof to execute a man, Che is said to have boasted. I only need proof that it's necessary to execute him. If you're still a fan of Marxism after all the death, suffering, and destruction it's caused, that's your right. But own up to it. Don't hide behind the "it's never really been tried" line. It has. I'm Paul Kengor, professor of political science at Grove City College for Prager University.
And that's the truth. So I'm going to wrap up tonight. Let's make no mistake. Socialism is the government providing for the individual, wherein the government owns and runs much of the nation. Incentivization barely exists for the individual, and those in government profit, not you, guaranteed. Communism is the ultimate goal of socialists, wherein the government, the state, owns and controls everything, and the people own nothing. There is no such thing as private property, and the government, the state, owns the individual as well. If communism were such a wonderful idea, why hasn't it spread like popular wildfire around the planet hundreds of years ago and stuck? Because communism in practice kills people, and it makes slaves of those who are not in the elite portion of government. Simple. And those in government profit, not you, guaranteed. We'd all do best to be reminded that in 2020, in an election year, everything is about the election. I have been really trying to be thoroughly and completely disabused of relating to anything anymore as coincidence. Coinky-dink in my world, it has died a hard, bloody, struggling death. It no longer exists. Forces never before arrayed in mass have been brought about by those who wish to do America harm, to literally ensure there is no such thing as America or the United States of America anymore. No more U.S. No more unity. Only division and hatred and violence and death and burning and looting and intimidation and fright and the eradication of history, the corruption of our youth, and the normalizing of everything that is anti-American. Leftists, Democrats, the American media maggots, anarchists, Antifa, socialists, communists, they've all been handed and are continuing to be handed a series of golden opportunities to tear down this nation. And they are taking complete and utter advantage of GAUPs, guilty, overeducated white people, many of whom are Republicans and are in the GOP. And all of those people and elements are also taking advantage of the WCM, the woke child mob, and the ignorance and complacency of the bulk of Americans who cover up in their homes, they cower in their homes over another strain of what has been proven to be a virulent flu. It is the perfect storm. It's a perfect opportunity for those who despise America, and they want to see her torn asunder. They are jealous of her power, her strength, her independence, and they want to see her put in her place, just like Barack Hussein Obama attempted to do. But he didn't at that time yet have the combination of events handed to him on a silver platter. He wanted and told us that he wanted to be fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
5 days away from fundamentally transforming the United States of America.
Well, why do you transform something that works? Doesn't America work? But you see, even Obama couldn't quite pull it off. That lethal combination of incidents and opportunities, the stars were not yet perfectly aligned. They were not exquisitely arrayed. And worst of all, OMB, Orange Man Bad. Donald John Trump, the guy with a dead orange cat on his head, was elected in place of somebody whose turn it was. It was her turn, Hillary Clinton. So if all of these elements can't have America, they're going to tear it apart because it's the perfect confluence now. It is the perfect storm. And if they can, they will install communism. That's the goal. It's not about some guy 57 days ago that nobody can remember right now. Make no mistake. Once the United States of America is gone, the only real firewall against tyranny and oppression is gone. The rest of the planet is going to fall as well. I refer to this constantly because it is a truism. Pastor Niemöller said, "First they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out. I wasn't a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I didn't speak out because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out because I was not a Jew. Then they came for me, and then there was no one left to speak up for me."
Monsieur has been locked!
Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children of all ages, thanks for listening to the Bloviating Zeppelins and Berserk Bobcat Saloon, live and direct right here from the SHR Media Studios. If you want to contact me, you can find me on Twitter at BZepp. You certainly won't find me on Facebook. I'm done for the entire month, and I won't be coming back until sometime in August. Thanks, Facebook. Fuck you. Also, promotional consideration is by the Lockheed Martin Skunk Works, and also by the Boeing Company. If it ain't Boeing, I ain't going. And also by Pratt & Whitney Engines Thrust. You can trust. Tiaras are, once again, by My Little Pony. Thanks to my personal KC-135 Kettle One refueling team, with which I will be consorting in less than an hour. I should put photographic proof of that up sometime, shouldn't I? Hey, thanks for listening live. Thanks for everybody being in Facebook chat, in SHR Media chat. Thanks for listening in the podcast. I appreciate each and every one of you. I'll be back Thursday night with a coronavirus update. That also is going to be an SHR Media special report. Oh, there's so much you don't know. The lies they are telling.
Everybody quiet down now and get some sleep.
Good night, everybody.
Good night, Mama. Good night, Ben.
Good night, everyone. Good night, Mama. Good night, Daddy.
Good night, children. Good night, Daddy. Good night, Elizabeth.
Good night, John Boy. Good night, Jim Bob. Good night, Jim Bob.
Good night, Jim Bob.
What's going on? I was asleep. What's everybody doing?
Good night.
Good night, Jim Bob. Go to sleep.
Good night, and good luck.